The wave hit her like a fist from God. 15 feet of black Pacific water drove Chief Petty Officer Jolene Nkemelu under the surface and spun her until she lost all sense of direction. Her lungs burned. Her rifle case dragged against her back like an anchor trying to pull her to the bottom. Somewhere above her, or below her, or beside her, the submarine waited with its hatch open and its crew counting down the seconds until they had to dive. She had been swimming for 47 minutes through the worst typhoon to hit the Korean coast in 30 years. For men were counting on her to reach that boat. She kicked hard toward what she prayed was the surface and promised herself she would not let the ocean take anyone else. 36 hours earlier, the water had been calm. The dry deck shelter of the USS Pennsylvania sat in absolute darkness as Nix checked her rifle for the 11th time. The submarine hummed beneath her, carrying 8 operators toward the North Korean coast at a depth of 200 feet. In 6 hours, they would surface just long enough to launch the sealed delivery vehicle. In 8 hours, they would be on enemy soil. In 12 hours, if everything went according to plan, they would be back aboard and headed home. Nothing ever went according to plan. Master Chief Garrison Breckenridge moved through the cramped space with the ease of a man who had spent 2 decades in submarines and helicopters and any other vehicle that could deliver him to places where people needed killing. He stopped beside Nix and looked down at her rifle. "That is a lot of weapon for an overwatch position," he said. Nix did not look up. "I like to be prepared." Breckenridge grunted. The sound carried 18 years of opinions about women in combat roles, about political decisions that put operators at risk, about everything he thought was wrong with the modern military. He did not say any of it out loud. He did not have to. "You're staying at the observation post," he continued. "Achebe will be with you on comms. The assault element handles the facility. You watch and report. If I need a shot taken, I will call for it. Otherwise, your eyes only." "Understood." Nix finally looked up. Her dark eyes held his for a moment longer than was comfortable. "Understood, Master Chief." He moved on to check the other operators. Nix returned to her rifle. Petty Officer First Class Damon Achebe settled onto the bench across from her. The communications specialist was built like a middleweight boxer and had a smile that could defuse almost any tension. "He used it now. Do not let him get to you," Achebe said quietly. "He is old school. Give him time." "I have been giving him time for 3 months," Nix replied. She slid around into the chamber and felt the satisfying click of precision engineering. "How much more time does he need?" Achebe shrugged. "He lost a guy on a mission 2 years ago. Politics got involved. Bad intel from people who cared more about optics than operations. He blames himself, but he aims it at everyone else." Nix understood blame. She understood aiming it in the wrong direction, too. She had been doing it for 17 years, ever since the night her father sailed into Hurricane Ike to rescue stranded fishermen and never came back. She had aimed her grief at the ocean, at the Coast Guard, at God, at herself for being 15 and asleep when he left. Eventually, she had learned to aim it at something useful. She had aimed it at becoming the kind of person who could go into the storm and come back out. Before we continue, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Maybe you have weathered a storm that tested everything you had. The mission briefing came 2 hours later in the submarine's cramped tactical space. Nix listened as Breckenridge outlined the operation. A North Korean naval officer had been feeding intelligence to Beijing, the kind of intelligence that could shift the balance of power in the Pacific. Command wanted him eliminated before his next scheduled meeting with his Chinese handlers. The typhoon was mentioned once, almost as an afterthought. "Meihua is tracking northeast," the intelligence officer said, pointing at a weather map. "Current projections put it well north of our AO. We should see some increased sea state during extraction, but nothing outside operational parameters." Nick studied the map. Typhoons were living things. They did not follow projections. They followed the heat of the ocean and the rotation of the earth and their own chaotic hunger. She had learned that lesson in Galveston Bay. She said nothing. No one had asked for her opinion. 6 hours later, she was climbing into the sealed delivery vehicle with 7 men who tolerated her presence but did not trust her with anything more than a scope and a trigger. The SDV was essentially a flooded miniature submarine, cold and dark and claustrophobic. They breathed through regulators and navigated by instruments, and spent 2 hours traveling through black water toward a coastline that wanted to kill them. Nix noticed the navigation error first. A current shift had pushed them south of their intended landing zone. She tapped Achebe and pointed at her dive computer, then at the compass heading. He checked his own instruments and nodded. Achebe relayed the correction to the navigator. The SDV adjusted course. No one acknowledged that Nix had caught the mistake. That was fine. She was not here for acknowledgement. They surfaced in a hidden cove as the first bands of rain began to fall. The wind had picked up since they submerged. Nix felt it immediately, felt the familiar electricity of a storm building towards something terrible. Breckenridge checked his tablet for updated weather data. His jaw tightened. Maywa shifted course, he announced. It is coming this way. The team exchanged glances. Extraction window was 12 hours out. The typhoon would make landfall in 14. We have time, Breckenridge decided. Mission proceeds. He began moving toward the tree line without waiting for discussion. One by one, the operators followed. Nix pulled the waterproof case from her pack and looked at the photograph inside. Her father smiled back at her, standing on the deck of his fishing boat, the Texas sun blazing behind him. She had carried this photo on every deployment for 11 years. "See you on the other side, Dad," she whispered. Then she sealed the case and followed her team into the storm. The jungle wanted to swallow them whole. Nix moved through vegetation, so thick it felt like pushing through a living wall, every step earned through effort and silence. The rain had intensified in the hour since they left the cove, fat drops that hit the broad leaves above with a sound like distant applause. Somewhere ahead, Breckenridge set a pace that punished anyone who fell behind. Nix did not fall behind. She had trained for this in places that made the Korean wilderness look hospitable. The swamps of Mississippi in August. The mountains of Afghanistan in winter. The urban nightmare of a dozen cities where the enemy lived next door and smiled at you in the morning. She had earned her place on this team through years of being better than good enough, and she would not give Breckenridge the satisfaction of seeing her struggle. Achebe moved beside her, his radio equipment adding 30 pounds to his already heavy load. He caught her eye and tilted his head toward the point man, an operator named Kruger who moved through the jungle like he had been born in it. "Kruger is slowing down," Achebe whispered. "He is worried about the storm." "Everyone should be worried about the storm," Nix replied. They covered 3 kilometers in 2 hours, following a route that kept them below ridge lines and away from the scattered villages that dotted the coastal region. The observation post was a rocky outcropping that overlooked the naval facility from 800 meters, high enough to see everything and far enough to remain invisible. Nix was scanning the terrain ahead when she saw the movement. She froze. Her hand came up in the signal for stop, and every operator behind her went still. Breckenridge moved back down the line until he reached her position. "What?" he demanded. Nix pointed. 50 meters ahead, partially hidden by the undergrowth, a North Korean soldier was urinating against a tree. His rifle leaned against a rock 3 feet away. He was humming something, a tune that carried faintly through the rain. Breckenridge studied the situation. "Patrol," he muttered. "Probably a 4-man team. The others are close." Nix had already found them. 2 more soldiers huddled under a makeshift shelter 20 meters beyond the first, sharing a cigarette and complaining about the weather. The 4th was harder to spot, but she caught the glint of his rifle scope as he scanned the jungle from a fallen log. For contacts, she breathed. 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and one on overwatch at 2 o'clock. Breckenridge looked at her. For a moment, something shifted in his expression, something that might have been reassessment. Then it was gone. "Kruger missed them," Achebe said quietly. "Walked right past the overwatch position." "Lucky you were paying attention," Breckenridge said. The words were neutral, but Nix heard what lived beneath them. "Lucky. Not skilled. Not professional. Lucky." She said nothing. There was nothing to say that would change his mind. Only actions would do that, and she had learned long ago that some men required a mountain of evidence before they would believe what a woman could do. The team rerouted, adding another kilometer to their movement, but avoiding the patrol entirely. By the time they reached the observation post, the rain had become a constant assault and the wind had begun to howl through the valleys like something angry and alive. Nix set up her rifle on a flat rock that gave her a clear line of sight to the naval facility below. Through her scope, she could see the target building, a concrete structure with narrow windows and a heavy security presence. Vehicles came and went through a checkpoint manned by guards who looked miserable in the weather. She settled into the stillness that came before a long watch. Her breathing slowed. Her heartbeat steadied. The world narrowed to the circle of her scope and the building 800 meters away. Achabe established their communications link and began monitoring enemy frequencies. The rest of the team spread out along the ridge, preparing for the assault that would come after nightfall. Breckenridge crouched beside her position. "What do you see?" "Standard security rotation," Nix reported. "For guard to the checkpoint, 2 on the roof, probably more inside. Vehicles are military, but not armored. They're not expecting trouble." "They never expect trouble until it arrives," Breckenridge said. He studied the facility through his own binoculars. "The target should be in the East Wing. That is where the meeting is scheduled." Nix swept her scope across the building. The East Wing had fewer windows, more guards, and a separate entrance with additional security. She was cataloging details when something caught her attention. A vehicle had arrived at the checkpoint. Not military. A black sedan with diplomatic plates. The guards were nervous, checking identification twice before waving it through. "Master Chief," she said, "we have company." Breckenridge turned his binoculars toward the sedan. It stopped at the East Wing entrance, and 2 men emerged. One was clearly North Korean, an officer in full uniform. The other was not. The second man was white, tall, wearing civilian clothes that looked expensive even from 800 meters. He moved like someone who expected doors to open for him. The North Korean officer treated him with obvious deference. "Who the hell is that?" Breckenridge muttered. Nix zoomed her scope to maximum magnification. The white man turned slightly, and she caught his profile. American. She would bet her pension on it. "We were not briefed on any American presence," Achabe said. His voice carried the tension that everyone was feeling. "No," Breckenridge agreed. "We were not." The 2 men disappeared into the East Wing. Nix kept her scope trained on the door, waiting for any additional information. Her mind was racing through possibilities. A hostage, a defector, a spy. None of them good. The wind shrieked across the ridge and nearly tore her scope from its mount. She grabbed it, steadied herself, and looked back at the facility. "Storm is getting worse," Kruger called from his position. "Weather update shows Mayhua accelerating. Landfall in 10 hours, not 14. Breckenridge cursed under his breath. He looked at the facility, then at the sky, then at his team. "Mission proceeds," he decided. "We go tonight as planned. Whatever is happening down there, our objective has not changed." Nix kept her eye pressed her scope. Below, the naval facility hummed with activity that no one had expected. And above, the typhoon gathered its strength for the killing blow. Something was very wrong here. She could feel it the way she could feel the pressure dropping, the way she had felt it the night her father sailed into the storm. But no one had asked for her opinion. So she watched and waited and kept her finger close to the trigger. The American emerged from the East Wing 47 minutes later. Nix had not moved from her position, had barely blinked, her entire existence compressed into the circle of her scope and the mystery it contained. He walked differently now. The confidence she had observed earlier had shifted into something else. Tension lived in his shoulders. His head moved in small arcs, scanning the compound, checking sight lines. These are not the movements of a diplomat or a businessman. These were the movements of someone who understood how violence worked. "He knows he is being watched," Nix said. Breckenridge had returned to her position after checking the team's readiness. He studied the American through his binoculars. "Could be paranoia," he offered. "Could be training. Either way, he is not our concern." "He should be," Nix replied. "An American in a North Korean intelligence facility the same night we are supposed to eliminate a high-value target. That is not a coincidence. Our mission is the naval officer. Breckenridge's voice carried the weight of a man who had learned to follow orders even when they did not make sense. Everything else is above our pay grade. Nix wanted to argue. She wanted to point out that walking into a situation they did not understand was exactly how operators ended up dead in places that would never acknowledge their sacrifice. But she had learned the limits of what her voice could accomplish in rooms full of men who had already made up their minds. She returned to her scope. The American was standing near the sedan now, speaking with his North Korean escort. The conversation looked heated. The officer was gesturing toward the building, then toward the gate, his body language shifting from deference to something closer to insistence. Then the American did something that made Nix's blood freeze. He looked up, not at the sky, not at the guards, but directly at the ridge where she lay concealed. 800 meters of distance, driving rain, failing light, and somehow his eyes found the exact position of her scope. He shook his head, slowly, deliberately. A message meant for her, and her alone. "Do not shoot. Master Chief," she breathed. "He knows we are here." Breckenridge swung his binoculars up. The American was already climbing back into the sedan, his face turned away. The moment vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "What are you talking about?" Breckenridge demanded. He looked right at me. "At my position." "He knows. That is impossible. We are 800 meters out, in full concealment during a storm. No one could." "He did," Nix insisted. "And he signaled me. Told me not to shoot." Breckenridge was quiet for a long moment. The wind screamed across the ridge, and somewhere below, the sedan pulled away from the east wing and headed toward the checkpoint. "You're certain?" he finally said. "I know what I saw." He turned to Achebe. "Give me a secure line to command. Now." The communication took 20 minutes to establish through the storm's interference. Nix listened as Breckenridge relayed what she had observed, his voice flat and professional, stripping her certainty down to clinical details. An unidentified American. Possible awareness of their position. Request for guidance. The response came in fragments, broken by static and the howling wind. Continue mission as briefed. Objective unchanged. American presence is acknowledged. No further information available at this time. Breckenridge stared at the radio like it had betrayed him. "Acknowledged," he said. "Continuing mission." He killed the connection and looked at Nix. Something had shifted in his expression. Not trust, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of doubt about his own assumptions. "They knew," Nix said. "Command knew he would be here." "Maybe. They sent us in blind." "Maybe," Breckenridge repeated. "But that does not change what we have to do. The target is still in that building. In 4 hours, we go in and we take him out. Whatever else is happening here, that is the job." Nix understood duty. She understood following orders even when every instinct screamed that something was wrong. She had watched her father do it the night he died, sailing into the hurricane because the Coast Guard said people needed help, and he was the only boat close enough to reach them. But she also understood that blind obedience had limits, that sometimes the people giving orders did not have the full picture, or worse, had the full picture and chose not to share it. "What if the American is the real target?" she asked. Breckenridge went still. "Think about it," Nix continued. "They send us to eliminate a North Korean intelligence officer. Standard operation happens all the time. But they know there is an American here, someone with training, someone who spotted a sniper position in a typhoon from 800 meters. They do not tell us about him because if they told us, we might ask questions." Achebe finished. His face had gone pale. "We might want to know why we are really here." The wind tore at their concealment, ripping branches from trees and sending debris skittering across the rocks. Below, the naval facility had gone quiet, its personnel retreating indoors as the storm intensified. Breckenridge looked at his team. 6 men who trusted him with their lives, plus 1 woman who had just complicated everything. "We stick to the mission," he decided. "The naval officer is confirmed hostile. Taking him out serves American interests regardless of whatever else is going on. But we stay alert. Anything feels wrong, we abort and extract." He turned to Nix. "You stay on overwatch. You see that American again, you tell me immediately. And if he does anything that threatens this team." She understood what he was not saying. If it comes to that, you take the shot. Nix settled back behind her rifle. The scope found the east wing again, the windows now lit from within, shadows moving behind the glass. Somewhere in that building, a target waited to die, and, somewhere else, an American who should not exist was carrying secrets that command had chosen to bury. The storm screamed its approach. For hours until they went in. For hours until everything fell apart. The assault began at 0300 hours in the middle of a screaming nightmare. Nix had never seen a storm move this fast. Typhoon Maehwa had accelerated beyond every projection, slamming into the Korean coast with a fury that bent trees horizontal and turned rain into a weapon. Visibility dropped to less than 50 meters. Communications became a patchwork of static and fragments. And somewhere below the ridge, Breckenridge led 5 operators into the heart of it. Nix watched through her scope as the assault element moved toward the facility. They were shadows against shadows, barely visible even to her trained eye, using the storm as cover in ways that would have been impossible under normal conditions. The guards at the checkpoint had abandoned their posts, retreating to a small shelter that offered minimal protection from the wind. Alpha Team in position, Breckenridge's voice crackled through her earpiece. Breaching in 30 seconds. Copy, Nix replied. Overwatch is set. 2 guards on the roof, both sheltered on the east side. You have a clear approach from the west. She tracked the team's movement through her scope, her finger resting beside the trigger, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. Achebe crouched beside her, monitoring the radio frequencies for any sign that the North Koreans had detected the intrusion. The breach was clean. Nix heard the muffled thump of a door charge, then the rapid pop of suppressed gunfire. Breckenridge's voice came through calm and controlled. Entry successful. 2 hostiles down. Moving to target location. Nix swept her scope across the compound. The guards on the roof had heard something. One of them was moving toward the west side, his rifle raised, trying to see through the curtain of rain. Rooftop guard moving to investigate, she reported. West side, 40 meters from your entry point. Can you take him? Breckenridge asked. Nix calculated. 800 meters in 40-knot gusts with horizontal rain. The shot was possible, but not certain. If she missed, she would compromise the entire operation. Affirmative, she said, but it is a difficult shot. Recommend you expedite. Copy. Moving fast. The guard reached the edge of the roof and looked down. For a terrible moment, Nix thought he had seen something. His rifle came up. His mouth opened to shout. She fired. The round traveled 800 meters through howling wind and driving rain. It struck the guard center mass and dropped him before he could make a sound. His body crumpled against the rooftop ledge, invisible from the ground below. Target down, Nix reported. Her heart was pounding, but her voice remained steady. Good shot, Breckenridge replied. The words carried weight they had not carried before. The second rooftop guard had noticed his partner's disappearance. He was moving now, cautious, his rifle sweeping the darkness. Nix tracked him through her scope. Second guard is alert, she warned. He's going to find the body in about 10 seconds. She heard Breckenridge curse. Then a window shattered somewhere inside the facility and alarms began to scream. We are compromised, Breckenridge announced. All teams, weapons free. The facility exploded into chaos. Lights snapped on across the compound. Guards poured from the barracks, still pulling on equipment, disoriented by the storm, but responding to their training. Nix began firing. Her first shot took the second rooftop guard as he raised his radio. Her second dropped a soldier who had emerged from the checkpoint shelter. Her third and fourth found targets near the east wing entrance, men who were trying to establish a defensive position. Achebe was calling out positions, feeding her information from the intercepted radio chatter. 3 hostiles moving from the north barracks. Vehicle starting near the motor pool. Reinforcements being requested from a nearby base. Nix processed each piece of information and kept shooting. Inside the facility, Breckenridge and his team fought their way toward the target. She could hear the battle through her earpiece, the sharp crack of gunfire, the shouted commands, the controlled chaos of operators doing what they had trained their entire lives to do. Target acquired, Kruger's voice announced. Package is secure. Nix allowed herself a moment of relief. Then she saw the black sedan. It was racing toward the facility gate, headlights cutting through the rain, moving far too fast for the conditions. The American. He was trying to escape. Master Chief, the sedan is mobile, she reported. The American is running. Let him go, Breckenridge replied. He is not our objective. But Nix could not let it go. Something about the way he had looked at her, the way he had signaled her not to shoot. He knew things. Things that might explain why Command had sent them into this storm blind. She tracked the sedan through her scope as it approached the gate. A guard stumbled into its path, waving for it to stop. The sedan did not slow down. It struck the guard and kept going, crashing through the gate, fishtailing onto the coastal road. He just ran down one of their own people, Nix said. He is not a friendly. Not our problem, Breckenridge insisted. Focus on extraction. The assault team was moving now, exiting the facility through a side entrance, dragging the body of the North Korean intelligence officer. The mission was complete. All they had to do was reach the extraction point. Nix provided cover as the team crossed the compound. Her rifle grew hot in her hands. She lost count of how many rounds she fired, how many targets she dropped. The storm swallowed everything, muffled the gunfire, hid the bodies, turned the entire operation into something that might have been a nightmare. Then Achebe grabbed her arm. We have a problem, he shouted over the wind. Nix looked at his face and felt her stomach drop. Extraction just called in, he said. The Zodiac team cannot reach us. Waves are too high. They had to abort. The words hit her harder than the wind. She looked toward the coast, toward the black expanse of ocean that churned and raged under Typhoon Meihua's assault. Their ride home had just disappeared, and behind them, enemy reinforcements were already on their way. The sea cave smelled like salt and decay, and the particular kind of desperation that came from knowing you were trapped. Nix pressed herself against the wet rock and listened to the storm rage outside. The team had made it to the coast in 40 minutes, moving through terrain that wanted to kill them almost as much as the North Koreans did. Kruger had taken shrapnel from a near miss during their escape. 2 of his ribs cracked and possibly broken. His breathing labored in the darkness. Breckenridge crouched near the cave entrance, his satellite radio pressed against his ear, trying to raise anyone who could help them. The storm turned every transmission into garbage, fragments of words dissolving into static before they could carry meaning. Achebe sat beside Nix, his shoulder warm against hers, the only comfort available in a situation that had none. What are our options? She asked quietly. Not many, he admitted. We are 5 kilometers from the original extraction point. Enemy patrols are going to be flooding this area within the hour. And that, he gestured toward the cave mouth where wind and rain screamed past, is not getting any better. Nix had known the answer before she asked. She had grown up on the Texas coast. She knew what hurricanes could do, knew how they could trap you, isolate you, turn every escape route into a death sentence. Her father had known it too, and he had gone out anyway. She pushed that thought down. This was not the time for ghosts. Breckenridge lowered the radio and turned to face the team. His expression was carved from stone, but his eyes betrayed the weight he was carrying. I made contact with the Pennsylvania, he announced. Intermittent, but enough. They cannot send another surface craft. The seas are running 20 feet and building. Any boat they launch would be swamped before it got within a mile of shore. So we wait out the storm, one of the operators suggested. Breckenridge shook his head. We do not have that luxury. North Korean reinforcements are already mobilizing. They know approximately where we are. Once this storm passes, they will have helicopters in the air and boats in the water. We will be surrounded before dawn. Then what? Kruger asked through gritted teeth. His hand pressed against his side, trying to hold his broken ribs in place. The submarine can surface, Breckenridge said. One time, in a brief window, approximately 2 hours from now. There is a sheltered area about 2 kilometers offshore where the wave height drops enough for them to open a hatch. If we can reach that position, they can extract us. 2 kilometers, Achebe repeated. In that, they all looked toward the cave entrance. The ocean beyond was invisible, swallowed by darkness and rain, but they could hear it. the roar of waves crashing against rocks, the deep percussion of water moving with enough force to crush bone. "I will go," Breckenridge said. "I will swim out, make contact with the sub, coordinate the extraction. The rest of you hold position here until—" "No." The word came from Nyx before she realized she was going to speak. Every head turned toward her. "No," she repeated. "You're not the best swimmer on this team." "I am." Breckenridge's jaw tightened. "Chief from Kemelu. I grew up in Galveston," she continued. "I was swimming in the Gulf before I could walk. I am combat diver qualified with the highest marks in my class. I have logged more open water hours than anyone here. You know this. You have seen my file. This is not about qualifications," Breckenridge started. "Then what is it about?" Nyx demanded. She stood up, facing him directly, refusing to look away. "You need someone who can make that swim. Someone who can survive 2 kilometers of open ocean in a typhoon. That is me. You know it is me." The cave fell silent, except for the howling wind. The other operators watched, caught between loyalty to their team leader and the undeniable logic of what Nyx was saying. Achebe spoke first. "She is right, Master Chief. I have seen her in the water. She is better than any of us." Breckenridge looked at his team. At Kruger, who could barely breathe. At the others, exhausted and battered from the assault. At Nyx, standing in front of him with her father's stubbornness burning in her eyes. "My father died in a storm like this," Nyx said quietly. Her voice did not waver. "He went out because people needed help, and he was the only one who could reach them. I have spent 17 years wondering what would have happened if someone better had been there. Someone who could handle what the ocean threw at them." She paused. "I'm here now. Let me do what I was built to do." Something shifted in Breckenridge's expression. Not defeat, not even acceptance. Something closer to recognition, as if he was seeing her clearly for the first time. He looked at Achebe. "She makes it to the sub. She coordinates extraction for all of us. We move to the coastal rocks, wait for her signal." Achebe nodded. Breckenridge turned back to Nyx. His voice was rough. "You come back in Kemelu. That is an order." Nyx felt something loosen in her chest. A knot she had been carrying for months, maybe years. She nodded once. "I will see you on the other side, Master Chief." She moved to her equipment and began waterproofing her rifle. The others watched in silence as she stripped off unnecessary gear, sealed her weapon in its protective case, and strapped it across her back. Achebe appeared beside her. "You do not have to take the rifle," he said. "It will slow you down." Nyx looked at him. "The rifle stays with me. If I make it to that submarine and you all are still stuck on shore, you're going to need someone who can shoot." She tightened the final strap and moved toward the cave entrance. The storm waited for her, hungry and patient, the same storm that had taken her father all those years ago. This time, she was going to win. The ocean hit her like a living thing with a personal grudge. Nyx dove through the first wave and felt it try to tear the rifle case from her back. The straps held, but the force spun her sideways, disorienting her before she had traveled 10 meters from shore. She kicked hard, found a surface, gasped a breath of air that was half rain, and started swimming. The water was warmer than she expected. Typhoons pulled heat from the ocean, fed on it, used it to fuel their destruction. She could feel that heat now, a deceptive comfort that masked the killing power of the waves rising around her. Her father had taught her to swim in water like this. Not this violent, not this extreme, but close enough. He would take her out in the skiff when the summer storms rolled through the Gulf, let her feel the swells lift and drop them, teach her to read the rhythm of the sea. "The ocean does not want to hurt you, Jojo." His voice echoed through 17 years of memory. "It just does not care if you live. You have to care enough for both of you." She cared. God help her, she cared. The first 15 minutes were survivable. Nyx found a rhythm, timing her strokes to the wave patterns, conserving energy when she could, pushing hard when she had to. Her GPS unit showed her position relative to the submarine's surfacing coordinates. 1.8 kilometers to go. Then the current shifted. She felt it before she understood it, a lateral pull that dragged her south, away from her target. The typhoon was reorganizing the ocean itself, creating flows and eddies that had not existed an hour ago. She adjusted her angle, swimming harder, burning energy she could not afford to lose. 1.5 kilometers. A wave broke over her head and drove her under. She tumbled through blackness, rifle case pulling her down, lungs screaming for air. For 3 seconds, she did not know which way was up. For 3 seconds, she was 15 years old again, standing on the dock in Galveston, watching her father's boat disappear into Hurricane Ike. She found the surface. She kept swimming. 1.2 kilometers. Her arms were beginning to fail. The rifle case had become an anchor, 30 pounds of dead weight that fought her with every stroke. She could cut it loose. One pull on the emergency release, and it would sink into the darkness, gone forever, and she would be faster, lighter, more likely to survive. She did not cut it loose. If she made it to that submarine without her rifle, she would be useless. A passenger, a survivor instead of a savior. And if her team was still trapped on shore when dawn came, they would need someone who could reach out across the water and touch the enemy with precision violence. The rifle stayed. 1 kilometer. Her mind began to wander, a dangerous sign of exhaustion and early hypothermia. She thought about command, about the cryptic orders, about the American who had looked directly at her scope and told her not to shoot. She understood now. The pieces had been falling into place since they left the facility, assembling themselves into a picture she did not want to see. The American was not a hostage. He was not a diplomat. He was CIA, someone who had gone to North Korea for reasons that lived in the shadows of official policy. And somewhere along the way, he had turned, started selling secrets, became a liability that could not be acknowledged. Command had known he would be at that facility. They had known about the Typhoon too, known that it would complicate extraction, known that they were sending a team into a situation that might not have a clean ending. They had sent Nix specifically because of her reputation. The woman who could make impossible shots. The sniper who never missed. If the American needed to disappear, she was supposed to make it happen. Plausible deniability. A rogue North Korean operation gone wrong. No American fingerprints on the body. She had been a weapon they aimed without telling her what she was shooting at. The rage gave her strength. She channeled it into her arms, her legs, her burning lungs. She would survive this swim. She would save her team. And then she would find out exactly who had decided to use her as an unwitting assassin. 700 meters. A rogue wave rose out of the darkness, bigger than anything she had seen, a black wall of water that blocked out even the faint glow of the submarine's position lights. She had 1 second to react. She dove. The wave passed over her like a freight train, dragging her down, spinning her, ripping at the rifle case with fingers made of pressure and chaos. She felt the strap give way on her left shoulder, felt the case begin to slide. No. She twisted, grabbed the strap with her right hand, and held on as the ocean tried to tear it away from her. Her lungs emptied. Her vision darkened at the edges. The waves seemed to last forever, an eternity of violence compressed into 15 seconds. Then it released her. She broke the surface gasping, the rifle case still clutched in her grip, the strap dangling useless. She would have to hold it now. Swim with one arm while the other kept her weapon from disappearing into the deep. She checked her GPS. 500 meters. The submarine's lights blinked in the distance, a faint red glow that meant salvation for everyone counting on her. She started swimming again, one armed, exhausted, hypothermic, and absolutely unwilling to stop. Her father's voice came to her one more time, clear as the night he left. "You have to care enough for both of you, Jojo." "I do, Dad," she whispered into the storm. "I do." 400 meters from the submarine, Nix stopped swimming. She did not make a conscious decision to stop. Her body simply refused to continue. Her left arm hung useless at her side, muscles seized from the sustained effort of one arm swimming. Her right arm still clutched the rifle case, but the grip was weakening, fingers going numb from cold and exhaustion. She floated on her back and let the waves carry her. The rain hammered her face. The wind screamed overhead. And somewhere in the darkness, the submarine waited with a hatch that might, as well have been on the moon. This is how he felt, she thought. At the end, when the boat was taking on water and the waves were too big and there was nothing left to do but float and wait. She had never allowed herself to imagine her father's final moments. The thought was too painful, too raw, even after 17 years. But now, suspended between sky and sea in the heart of typhoon, she could not stop the images from coming. Had he been afraid? Had he thought of her mother, of the life he was leaving behind? Had he fought until the very last second, or had he surrendered to the ocean that he had loved his entire life? The waves lifted her up and dropped her down. The rifle case pulled at her arm. The cold crept deeper into her bones. She could let go. Right now, in this moment, she could simply release her grip and let the weight drag her under. It would be quick. The ocean would take her the way it had taken him, and maybe somewhere on the other side they would find each other again. The thought lasted 3 seconds. Then she heard Achebe's voice in her memory. "She is right, Master Chief. I have seen her in the water. She is better than any of us." She heard Breckenridge. "You come back, Kemelu. That is an order." She heard Kruger's labored breathing, the sound of a man with broken ribs who was counting on her to bring help. And she heard her father, not his final moments, but the thousands of moments that came before, teaching her to bait a hook, showing her how to read the tide charts, holding her up in the warm Gulf water while she learned to float. "You are a fish, Jojo. You were born for this water. Do not ever let anyone tell you different." She was not going to die here. Nix rolled onto her stomach and started swimming again. One arm, one kick at a time. The rifle case dragged behind her, gripped in fingers that had forgotten how to feel. 300 meters. The eye of the storm arrived without warning. One moment she was fighting through chaos, and the next the wind simply stopped. The rain ceased. The waves settled into long, rolling swells that lifted her gently instead of trying to kill her. She floated in sudden silence, gasping, trembling, unable to believe what was happening. Above her, stars appeared through a perfect circle of clear sky. The eye wall towered around her, a cathedral of clouds lit by lightning that flickered in the distance. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing she had ever seen. She had maybe 5 minutes before the other side of the storm hit. 5 minutes of calm in the heart of the monster. She used every second. Her arms found new strength. Her legs kicked with renewed purpose. The submarine's lights grew brighter, closer, until she could see the dark shape of its hull breaking the surface. 200 meters. She fumbled for her waterproof radio, pressing the transmit button with fingers that barely functioned. "Pennsylvania, this is Chief Nkemelu," she gasped. "I am 200 meters from your position, requesting immediate recovery." Static. Then a voice, clear and steady. "Chief Nkemelu, we have visual on your position. Swim to the forward deck. We have a team ready to bring you aboard." She swam. The eye was beginning to close. She could see the wall approaching from the east, a curtain of rain and wind that would make the first half of the storm look gentle. She had minutes, maybe less. 100 meters. 50. 20. Hands reached down from the submarine's deck and grabbed her arms. She felt herself being hauled upward, felt the solid metal beneath her body, felt the rifle case being lifted from her grip. She lay on the deck, chest heaving, staring up at the stars that were already disappearing behind the advancing storm. "I need to talk to your captain," she managed. "My team is still on shore. We have to go back for them." A sailor leaned over her, his face creased with concern. "Ma'am, we cannot surface again in these conditions. The second half of this storm." "I know what the second half of this storm looks like," Nix interrupted. She forced herself to sit up, forced her voice to steady. "I just swam through the first half. Now get me to your captain, because there are 6 men on that shore who are going to die if we do not figure out how to reach them." The sailor hesitated. Then he saw something in her eyes, something that made arguments pointless. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "This way." Nix stood on shaking legs and followed him toward the hatch. Behind her, the eye wall slammed shut and the typhoon resumed its assault. She was halfway there. Now, she just had to find a way to save everyone else. The submarine's control room was a cathedral of quiet efficiency. Sailors moved between stations with practiced calm, their voices low, their movements precise. Commander Sarah O'Yelleran stood at the center of it all, a woman who had spent 22 years earning the right to command a nuclear submarine and was not about to let a typhoon tell her what she could not do. Nick stood before her wrapped in a thermal blanket, still dripping seawater onto the deck, refusing the medical attention that waited in the corridor behind her. "Let me understand this correctly," O'Yelleran said. "You want me to surface my boat in the middle of a Category 3 typhoon, hold position in hostile waters while enemy patrols are actively searching for your team, and somehow extract 6 operators from a coastline that is currently being battered by 20-foot waves?" "Yes, ma'am," Nix replied. "That is exactly what I want." O'Yelleran studied her for a long moment. The commander's eyes were sharp, assessing, the eyes of someone who had made impossible decisions before and knew what they cost. "You swam 2 kilometers through that storm," she said, "with a rifle strapped to your back." It was not strapped at the end. Nix's mouth twitched. The strap broke. I had to hold it. Something like respect flickered across O'Yelleran's face. She turned to her executive officer. "Where's our window?" she asked. The XO consulted his instruments. "Storm surge is peaking in approximately 40 minutes. After that, we have maybe a 20-minute window where conditions drop to merely catastrophic before the back end of the eye wall hits. If we're going to surface, that is when." O'Yelleran nodded slowly. "And the enemy patrol activity. 2 patrol boats departed once in 30 minutes ago," the XO reported. "Current course puts them along the coast, approximately 5 kilometers south of the team's last known position. They are fighting the same storm we are. It is slowing them down." Nix felt hope spark in her chest for the first time since she had entered the water. "There is another problem," O'Yelleran said. She turned back to Nix. "Even if we surface, your team has to reach us. They cannot swim 2 kilometers in these conditions. Not with wounded." "They do not have to swim 2 kilometers," Nix said. Her mind was racing, assembling pieces into a plan that was insane but possible. "You surface as close to shore as you can safely manage. I swim back in with a line and a beacon. I guide them to a position where you can recover us." "You want to go back in that water?" O'Yelleran said. The words were flat, incredulous. "I want to bring my team home," Nix replied. "Whatever that takes." The control room had gone quiet. Every sailor within earshot was watching the exchange, witnessing something they would tell stories about for the rest of their careers. O'Yelleran was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to her XO. "Plot a course to the closest safe surfacing point," she ordered. "And get this woman a fresh wetsuit. She's going back in." The next 30 minutes passed in a blur of preparation. Nix forced herself to eat, knowing her body needed fuel even if her stomach rebelled at the thought of food. She submitted to a medical check that confirmed what she already knew. Mild hypothermia, muscle exhaustion, multiple contusions. Nothing that would stop her. She checked her rifle. The waterproof case had done its job. The weapon was dry, functional, ready. She cleaned it anyway, running through the familiar motions while her mind worked through what was coming. Achebe found her on the radio frequency they had established before she left. His voice was strained but steady. "Nix, the situation has changed," he said. "We're taking fire." She went cold. "Report. North Korean patrol found us about 10 minutes ago. We're holding them off, but Kruger cannot move fast, and we are running low on ammunition. We relocated to the coastal rocks, but they have us pinned. Breckenridge is." The transmission dissolved into static. Nix waited, heart pounding for it to resume. "Breckenridge is hit," Achebe continued. "Shoulder wound. He is still fighting, but we cannot hold this position much longer." Nix closed her eyes. She had known this was possible, had known that every minute she spent on a submarine was a minute her team spent dying. But hearing it, knowing that Breckenridge was bleeding on those rocks while she sat in relative safety, turned possibility into unbearable reality. "Hold your position," she transmitted. "I am coming back. 30 minutes. "Nix," Achebe said. His voice cracked slightly. "Do not die for us." She thought about her father's sailing into Hurricane Ike. She thought about the 17 years she had spent becoming someone who could go into the storm and come back out. I'm not dying today, she said. And neither are you. She cut the transmission and turned to find Commander O'Yelleran standing behind her. We surface in 15 minutes, O'Yelleran said. Her expression was unreadable. I heard the transmission. Your team is in contact with enemy forces. Yes, ma'am. O'Yelleran nodded slowly. Then I suppose you will need to swim faster this time. She reached out and gripped Nix's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity from one warrior to another. Bring them home, Chief. Nix squared her shoulders. The exhaustion was still there, the pain, the fear. But beneath it all was something stronger. Something her father had given her in the warm waters of the Gulf. Something the Navy had forged into steel, something that would not let her quit while people she cared about were dying. I will, she said. 15 minutes later, the submarine broke the surface into hell. The second swim was worse than the first. Nix had known it would be. The brief rest on the submarine had allowed her muscles to stiffen, her body to recognize just how much damage it had sustained. Every stroke sent fire through her shoulders. Every kick reminded her that human beings were not designed for this kind of punishment. She swam anyway. The submarine had surfaced 800 meters from shore, as close as O'Yelleran dared bring her boat in the churning waters. A tether line trailed behind Nix, a lifeline that would guide her team back through the chaos. Her rifle was strapped to her back again, the broken strap replaced with paracord that bit into her chest with every movement. She could hear the gunfire before she could see the shore. The sound cut through the wind in sharp staccato bursts, muzzle flashes strobing against the rocks like angry lightning. Her team was still fighting, still alive. She swam harder. 600 meters. The waves were different here, closer to shore, shorter and more violent as they felt the drag of the seafloor beneath them. They broke over her head in rapid succession, giving her barely enough time to gasp a breath before the next one hit. She thought about nothing but the next stroke, the next kick, the next breath. Everything else, the pain, the cold, the fear, she packed into a box and shoved into the back of her mind. There would be time to feel it later. Right now, there was only forward. 400 meters. A flare arced over the coastline, North Korean, illuminating the rocks where her team had taken cover. In that brief red light, she saw them. Achebe crouched behind a boulder, firing controlled bursts toward an enemy she could not see. Kruger slumped against the rocks, still holding a pistol but clearly unable to move. Two other operators covering different angles. In Breckenridge, his left arm hanging useless, blood black against his uniform, still directing fire with a voice that carried even over the storm. Hold the line, he was shouting. Help is coming. Hold the line. Nix felt something crack open in her chest. This man who had doubted her, dismissed her, treated her as a liability for 3 months. This man was bleeding out on a rock in a typhoon, still fighting, still believing that she would come. She would not let him be wrong. 200 meters. The waves threw her against a submerged rock, and she felt something give in her left side. Ribs, probably. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, a white hot spike that made breathing feel like swallowing broken glass. She pushed through it. 100 meters. She found footing on the rocky bottom and half swam, half crawled toward the shore. The gunfire was deafening now, close enough that she could hear the snap of rounds passing overhead. The North Koreans had established a position on a small rise 50 meters inland, pouring fire down onto her team. Nix dragged herself onto the rocks and unslung her rifle. Her hands were shaking, her vision blurred at the edges. Her ribs screamed with every breath. None of it mattered. She opened the waterproof case and pulled out her weapon. The scope was fogged from the temperature change, but she knew this rifle like she knew her own heartbeat. She wiped the lens, shouldered the stock, and found her first target. The North Korean machine gunner was the priority. He had her team pinned, sweeping the rocks with bursts that kept everyone's heads down. She calculated the wind, the distance, the angle. 40 Nightgeists. 70 meters. Uphill shot. She fired. The machine gun went silent. Nix shifted targets. A soldier with a radio calling for reinforcements. She dropped him before he could finish his transmission. Another soldier moving to take over the machine gun. She dropped him too. 3 shots. 3 kills. The enemy position went quiet for a precious few seconds as the surviving North Koreans tried to understand what was happening. Breckenridge's voice cut through the chaos. Nix. His tone carried something she had never heard from him before. Something that sounded like awe. I am here, she called back. I have a line to the submarine. We need to move now. She scrambled across the rocks to his position, keeping low, rifle ready. Achebe grabbed her arm when she reached them, his eyes wide. You came back, he said. You actually came back. Did you think I would not? He shook his head. I hoped. I was not sure. Breckenridge was pale, his uniform soaked with blood that the rain kept washing away. But his eyes were clear and his voice was steady. What is the plan? He asked. No hositashchen. No second-guessing. Just a soldier ready to follow wherever she led. Nix pointed toward the water. 800 meters to the submarine. I have a tether line. We clip on and swim. Kruger goes first with a float. The rest of us provide cover and follow. In these conditions, Achebe started. In these conditions, we die if we stay here, Nix interrupted. Reinforcements are coming. That patrol boat is coming. We have maybe 10 minutes before this position is overrun. She looked at each of them in turn. I did not swim 4 kilometers through a typhoon to watch you die on this beach. We are leaving. Now. Breckenridge met her eyes. For a moment, the weight of everything that had passed between them hung in the air. The dismissals, the doubts, the slow recognition of how wrong he had been. You heard the chief, he said to the team. We are moving. On her command. Nix nodded once. Then she turned back toward the enemy position, raised her rifle, and began laying down cover fire. The fight to the water's edge was about to begin. They moved like ghosts through the rain. Nix led the way, her rifle up, scanning for threats while the team made for the waterline. Kruger was strapped to an improvised float, his broken ribs making every jostle a fresh agony that he bore in tight-lipped silence. Achebe guided the float, while 2 operators flanked them. Breckenridge brought up the rear despite his wound, refusing to let anyone else take the most dangerous position. The North Koreans had regrouped. Nix could hear them shouting on the rise, organizing another assault. She had bought the team minutes with her shooting, but minutes were all they had. 30 meters to the water. A burst of automatic fire raked the rocks to their left. One of the operators went down, clutching his leg, cursing through gritted teeth. Achebe grabbed him and kept moving, half dragging the wounded man toward the sea. 20 meters. Nix dropped to one knee and returned fire. Her rounds found flesh, and the shooting from the rise faltered. She ejected the empty magazine, slammed in a fresh one, and kept moving. 10 meters. The water reached for them like a hungry mouth. Waves crashed against the rocks, throwing spray 20 feet into the air, the ocean's violence somehow even more terrifying up close than it had been from the middle. Clip onto the line, Nix ordered. Everyone clips on. We stay together, or we die apart. The team obeyed without question. One by one, they attached their harnesses to the tether line that stretched back toward the submarine. Kruger went first, his float providing enough buoyancy to keep his head above water. Then the wounded operator. Then Achebe, then the others. Breckenridge reached her position last. His face was gray, blood loss stealing the color from his skin, but his eyes still burned with the stubborn refusal to quit that had carried him through 2 decades of warfare. You need to go, Nix told him. I will cover the withdrawal. Like hell, he growled. We go together. Master Chief. That is not a suggestion, Chief Nkemelu. He clipped onto the line directly behind her position. You do not get to save everyone and then die on this beach. That is not how this story ends. Nix wanted to argue. Every tactical instinct told her that someone needed to stay behind, needed to keep the enemy's heads down while the team made for open water. But she saw the look in his eyes and recognized it. The same look she had seen in the mirror before she dove into the typhoon the first time. Fine, she said. Together. They entered the water side by side. The cold hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs, making her injured ribs scream in protest. She kicked hard, pulling herself along the tether line, feeling Breckenridge struggling beside her. The team was strung out along the line like beads on a string, each operator fighting their own battle against the waves. Progress was agonizingly slow. Every meter felt like a mile. Behind them, the North Koreans reached the waterline. Muzzle flashes strobed against the darkness. Rounds snapped through the air, plunging into the water around them. "Keep moving," Nick shouted. "Do not stop." 200 meters from shore. The gunfire was less accurate now, the storm and the distance working in their favor. But Nix could hear something else beneath the wind. A low thrumming that grew louder with each passing second. The patrol boat. It emerged from the darkness like a nightmare given form. 30 feet of steel and weapons, its searchlight cutting through the rain, sweeping toward the line of swimmers. Nix made a decision. "Keep going," she told Breckenridge. "Get them to the sub." "Where are you?" She unclipped from the tether line before he could stop her. The current grabbed her immediately, pulling her away from the team, but she was already swimming. Not toward the submarine, toward a cluster of debris that floated 50 meters to the north. Storm wreckage, broken wood, and tangled fishing nets. She reached the debris and found a piece of timber large enough to support her weight. Her fingers were numb, her arms screaming, but she pulled herself onto the makeshift platform and unslung her rifle. The patrol boat was closing on her team. Its deck guns swiveled toward the line of swimmers, preparing to turn the water red. Nix shouldered her weapon. The platform beneath her rocked and pitched. The wind howled. The rain drove into her eyes. She found the deck gunner in her scope. 800 meters. 40 night crosswind. Shooting from an unstable platform in the middle of typhoon. Impossible. She fired. The deck gunner's head snapped back, and he crumpled over his weapon. She shifted targets. The searchlight operator was scrambling for cover. She dropped him before he made it 3 steps. The light stayed on, but now it pointed uselessly at the sky. A third soldier rushed toward the deck gun. She put a round through his chest. The patrol boat slowed, its crew suddenly realizing they were being hunted. The searchlight swept wildly, trying to find the source of the death that was picking them apart. Nix kept shooting. She did not aim to sink the boat. She aimed to terrify, to make them think twice about pursuing a group of swimmers who had a guardian angel with a rifle and perfect aim. By her 5th shot, the patrol boat was turning away. By her 7th, it was retreating into the storm, its surviving crew more interested in living than in catching a handful of American operators. Nix lowered her rifle and looked toward the submarine. The team had reached it. She could see them being pulled aboard, dark shapes against the vessel's hull. Breckenridge's voice crackled through her waterproof radio. "Nix." His voice was raw. "Get back here. Now." She smiled despite everything, despite the cold and the pain and the exhaustion that went bone deep. "On my way, Master Chief." She slipped off the debris and began swimming toward the submarine for the 3rd time that night. The patrol boat came back. Nix was 400 meters from the submarine when she heard the engine. The sound cut through the storm like a blade, growing louder, angrier, the crew apparently having found their courage or received orders they could not refuse. She turned in the water and saw the searchlights sweeping toward her. They had figured out where the shots came from. They were coming for revenge. She could not outswim a boat, could not fight it from the water with a rifle she could barely hold above the waves. For a moment, a terrible clarity settled over her. This was how it ended. Not on the rocks with her team, not in the first desperate swim, but here, 400 meters from safety, alone in the dark. Her father's face flashed through her mind. The last time she had seen him, standing on the dock, the wind already picking up, telling her he would be back before morning. Some promises could not be kept. The submarine's deck gun opened fire. The sound was thunder, deep and rolling, nothing like the sharp crack of small arms. Commander O'Yelleran had brought her boat to the surface and was engaging the patrol craft with everything she had. Rounds tore through the water between Nix and the approaching boat. The patrol craft swerved hard, its searchlight swinging wildly as the crew scrambled to respond to this new threat. Return fire sparked against the submarine's hull, but the Pennsylvania was built to survive far worse than a patrol boat's weapons. Nix did not waste the opportunity. She swam 300 meters, The battle raged around her, tracers cutting lines of light through the rain, explosions of water where rounds struck the surface. She kept her head down and pulled herself through the chaos, stroke by stroke, breath by breath. 200 meters. The patrol boat took a direct hit. Something in its engine compartment detonated, sending a column of flame into the sky that the rain immediately began to devour. The vessel listed hard to starboard, taking on water, its crew abandoning their weapons to fight for survival. 100 meters. Nix could see the submarine clearly now. Figures on the deck, waving her in. Breckenridge among them despite his wound, despite every reason he had to be below getting medical attention. He was not leaving until she was aboard. 50 meters. Her arms had stopped working properly. The strokes that had carried her through miles of typhoon were reduced to feeble splashing, her muscles finally surrendering to demands that no human body was designed to meet. She was sinking as much as swimming, the rifle on her back dragging her down. She felt hands in the water around her. Achebe on one side, another operator on the other, grabbing her harness, kicking hard toward the submarine. "I told you not to die for us." Achebe gasped in her ear. She tried to respond, but her voice would not cooperate. The cold had stolen it along with everything else. They reached the hull. More hands from above, grabbing her arms, her equipment, hauling her upward with desperate strength. She felt metal beneath her body, felt the solidity of the deck, felt the rain still hammering down, but somehow less hostile now that she was no longer at the mercy of the sea. Breckenridge's face appeared above her. His wounded arm was bound in a hasty sling, blood still seeping through the bandage, but his eyes were bright with something she had never seen directed at her before. "Pride, you did it," he said. His voice cracked on the words. "You brought us home." Nix wanted to say something, wanted to tell him that she had not done it alone, that the team had fought for every meter, that Commander O'Yelleran had risked her boat and her career to save them. But the words would not come. Instead, she reached up with a trembling hand and gripped his good arm. He gripped back. Around them, the crew was already moving, the hatch sealing, the deck clearing, the submarine beginning its dive to safety. The patrol boat burned on the surface behind them, a funeral pyre for a mission that had gone wrong in every possible way and still ended with everyone alive. Nix let herself be carried below. The warmth of the submarine's interior hit her like a physical force, painful after so long in the cold, her body not quite believing that the ordeal was over. Medical personnel surrounded her. Blankets appeared. Someone was cutting away her wet suit, checking her vitals, speaking in calm, professional tones about hypothermia and exhaustion and the broken ribs that would need attention. She let them work, let herself drift into space between consciousness and collapse. Her father's voice came to her one last time. Not the memory of his departure, not the ghost of his final moments, but something older, warmer. The voice of a man teaching his daughter to swim in the gentle waters of Galveston Bay. "You're a fish, Jojo. You were born for this water." She had been born for this water. And tonight, the water had not been able to take her. Sleep pulled at her edges. She let it come. The last thing she heard before the darkness took her was Achebe's voice, quiet and wondering. For kilometers. She swam 4 kilometers in a typhoon. Then there was only silence and warmth and rest. Nix woke to the hum of engines and the gentle sway of a submarine running deep. She lay still for a moment, letting consciousness return in pieces. The medical bay was quiet, lit by soft overhead lights that did not assault her eyes. And 4 dripped steadily into her arm. Her ribs were wrapped tight, each breath a reminder of what they had cost her. But the pain was manageable now. Distant. She was alive. The thought seemed impossible. After everything, after the typhoon and the gunfire and the 4 kilometers of ocean that had tried to kill her, she was still here, still breathing, still herself. A figure sat in the chair beside her rack. Breckenridge. His arm was properly bandaged now, held in a clean sling, his color better than it had been on the submarine's deck. He was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "How long?" she asked. Her voice came out as a croak. 14 hours, he replied. "Not going to warm you up slow. Said you were about 20 minutes from your core temperature dropping into the danger zone when we pulled you out. Nix processed that. 20 minutes. She had been 20 minutes from dying when Achebe's hands found her in the water. The team, she asked. Everyone made it. Kruger is stable. Henderson took a round through his calf, but he will walk again. The rest of us are bumps and bruises. He paused. Thanks to you. She shook her head slightly. It hurt. Thanks to everyone. O'Yelleran, Achebe, you. I did not do it alone. No, Breckenridge agreed. But you did what none of us could have done. What I cannot have done. He leaned forward, his eyes holding hers with uncomfortable intensity. I spent 3 months treating you like a liability, telling myself that politics had put you on my team and politics would get someone killed. He exhaled slowly. I was wrong. I was wrong about all of it. Nick said nothing. There was nothing to say. She had known he was wrong from the beginning. Hearing him admit it did not change what she had endured, but it mattered anyway. It mattered more than she wanted it to. When we get back, Breckenridge continued, I am putting you in for a commendation. I am also requesting that you be permanently assigned to the team. Not as support, as a full operator. She blinked. That was not how it worked. Women in her position did not get assigned to Tier 1 units as full operators. The regulations, the politics, the institutional resistance. None of it allowed for what he was describing. You will have to fight for that, she said. I know. His jaw tightened. I have been fighting the wrong battles for a long time. Maybe it is time to fight the right ones. He stood, wincing slightly at the movement, and looked down at her. Get some rest, Chief. We're still 12 hours from port. Plenty of time to figure out how we explain this mess to command. He moved toward the door, then stopped. The American, he said. The one at the facility. We got word while you were out. He never made it off the peninsula. North Koreans caught up with him about an hour after we extracted. He paused. Command is not saying much, but reading between the lines, I think you were right. I think we were supposed to clean up someone else's problem and not ask questions. Nix absorbed that. The American was dead. Whatever secrets he had carried, whatever betrayals he had committed, the ocean and the enemy had claimed him in the end. Command had gotten what they wanted, just not the way they planned. Does it bother you, she asked, being used like that? Breckenridge was quiet for a long moment. It used to, he finally said. Now I figure the only thing I can control is what I do with the time I have and the people I am responsible for. Everything else is above my pay grade. He left without another word. Nix lay in the silence and let her thoughts drift. She thought about Command and their secret agendas. She thought about the typhoon and the 4 kilometers of water that had tested everything she was. She thought about her father. She reached for the small waterproof case on the table beside her rack. Someone had placed it there while she slept. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The photograph was still inside. Wrinkled now, the edges soft from moisture that had crept in despite the seal, but the image was clear. Her father on his boat, the sun behind him, smiling at the camera like he had all the time in the world. She traced the outline of his face with her fingertip. I understand now, Dad, she whispered. You did not go into that storm to die. You went because someone needed you. Because you were the only one who could reach them. She closed her eyes and felt something shift in her chest. A weight she had carried for 17 years, lifting, not disappearing, not completely, but changing, becoming something she could bear. You would have been proud of me, she said. I was a fish out there, just like you always said. The submarine hummed around her. The ocean pressed against the hull, the same ocean that had tried to kill her, that had taken her father, that would always be waiting for its next chance. But today it had not one. Nix tucked the photograph against her heart and let herself drift back towards sleep. There would be debriefs and commendations and battles still to fight. There would be Breckenridge's recommendation and the resistance it would face and the long, slow work of changing minds that did not want to be changed. But all of that was tomorrow. Today, she had swum through a hurricane with a rifle on her back, and she had brought her team home, and she was alive. Her father's daughter, a fish in the water, unstoppable. If this story moved you, drop a comment about what stayed with you most. Maybe you know someone who runs toward the storm when everyone else runs away.